Hey, what's going on, guys? Nick from Kizaru Gaming here, and today I have a super special video for you. Today, I'm going to do the first collaboration with another Yugi tuber on my channel. I know him as Ben, but you guys know and love him as Sir Emanon. Great to have you here, man.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? How you been? How you doing?
Fantastic, man. How have you been? I know it's been a little while since we've seen each other. We do go to the same locals together, and we've been friends for a couple of years now. But unfortunately, due to recent circumstances of COVID, there hasn't been much going on Yu-Gi-Oh wise. But now we're getting a sense of normalcy, and things are starting to go back to normal a little bit.
Yeah, pretty much just been Yugi tubing around here, and ideally, hopefully, as early as next week, we'll be able to go back to locals here, which will be pretty great. Been missing everybody, and hoping that we can see each other again soon.
Fantastic, man. Yeah, obviously all the other guys at the locals, we miss you too. We can't wait to have you back. And if you haven't already, please go over to Sir Emanon's channel. Subscribe to him. I will be linking him in the bio down below. But today we are just going to discuss what we feel is going to be the meta for the upcoming format, which is post-July 2021 ban list. So if you want to hop right in here, the first deck we have here is Adamancipator. And Adamancipator has done a couple of things, but I can't honestly justify putting it above Rogue, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, ever since the Link Frost hit, it's been hard to make like really contained combos because like previously you would go, Needle Fiber into Link Frost, you'd do the Marcher combo into Raptite, like you get really far off of just that one play. But ever since that happened, you really just need a lot of extenders, and that makes you super vulnerable to hand traps. Like if you don't specifically get Guardian online, then you just kind of lose, and you also can still lose to like Dark Ruler and Droplet and stuff. So it's pretty hard for the deck to compete when there's other, I think, higher ceiling combo decks in the format.
Absolutely. I feel like, post Link Cross ban, the deck became a lot more RNG based than anything. You really have to get lucky off of what you're milling off the Adamancipators. So I feel comfortable putting that in Rogue. Next up is a personal bias of mine. Ignister is one of my favorite Cybers decks, even though there's only like 4 that exist. I put it at 1.5. I think the deck is insane. I love it. Unfortunately, it does have its shortcomings. It really only does one thing going first. It has its turn 1 play of making the Arrival Cybers, and that's really all it does. It also has that Graveyard Negate. So I can't justify putting it at tier 1 with the rest of the meta decks, but I think with enough time and practice, it can shine in a format.
Yeah, I will say like the one thing it has going for it is that it's fairly new and it's relatively unsolved, at least compared to like every other deck that seems to have just been around for like a decade at this point. But this deck definitely is cool to see. It has a different sort of game plan than a lot of these other decks are trying to achieve. It's just a question of whether or not it'll actually be enough to stand up to what's actually going to be good.
Absolutely. I think it definitely has potential, but we're going to have to see what it does going forward. Next up, we have Burning Abyss, and again, I'm going to have to put Burning Abyss to the Rogue category. And now this is strictly pure Burning Abyss. This isn't any variations. Later on in the list, you see we do have Phantom Knight. Pure Burning Abyss, moving towards the trap version of it. I mean, Fiend Grieving is a Burning Abyss card. Whether anyone wants to disagree, it's just a Burning Abyss card. It definitely has potential and definitely a lot of plays that it can do, but it really doesn't match up with a lot of the other decks tier 2 above on this list.
Yeah, it kind of pains me to say, and this is actually the deck that I picked for my new budget series, because the deck definitely has some strong advantages for it, in that it's really grindy, it's very recursive. If you are playing, of course, a quote-unquote full power BA build, you have cards like Dragoon, and you have like Zeus going second. It's just very difficult when the deck is fairly linear now compared to like other iterations of what it used to be. Like they were heavy combo builds, for example, with like 3 Mali and like the Chaos Dragons and stuff. But right now it's very much a reactive deck, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think a lot of the other trap decks, I think could fulfill its role slightly better.
Absolutely. Burning Abyss as a pure deck by itself can definitely shine in a format. I just don't personally think it's going to shine in this one. Moving on to the next list, or I'm sorry, the next deck, we have Dinosaur, and I honestly can't justify putting it above tier 2. Konami finally read Misk and realized that Misk is a problem. I think Dinosaur was about tier 1.5 to tier 1 before that. Misk to 1 just makes it so much harder to establish a grind game. Being able to just keep using it over and over again, not just the protection effect, the banish effect is honestly, in my opinion, even better. I mean, it protects you from getting Nibiru'd. It gets every one of your combos started, and just losing that ability just makes it so much harder to grind further on.
Yeah, last time we saw Misk at one, the deck definitely evolved a little bit, and it took on some different forms. Like we've seen things like Shaddoll Dino in the past, for example. And I also wonder if people will adapt and play things like Overtext Quatless to recycle it, because people forget that that has a hand effect as well. But yeah, definitely with one Misk, it's a lot less consistent in what it's able to accomplish, and the degree of safety it's able to accomplish those game plans. And it's still very powerful if it gets to play unhindered. It's just that's going to happen a lot less frequently.
Absolutely. Coming up next, we have a bit of an odd one. So it is Shaddoll, Invoked, Dogmatika. We do actually have 3 separate characters for each Shaddoll, Invoked, and Dogmatika. A lot of people that make tier lists for some reason split them up. I'm going to put them all together because I believe it's just kind of one deck. I don't think that it really meshes well with anything else. Shaddoll, Invoked, Dogmatika is the deck, and I'm going to put that at tier 1. So I'm just going to move all 3 of those up there real quick, and this is just representing one deck. So Shaddoll, Invoked, Dogmatika, honestly, it's 15 Called by the Graves and then Nadir's Servant. You do not care about your Shaddolls, you do not care about your Invoked. As long as you're resolving Nadir's Servant, you're winning the game. I mean, Nadir's Servant just enables every one of your plays. It gets you to Schism, it gets you to your Fleur-de-Lis, it can get you to Ecclesia, Punishment, whatever you need. It is so reactive and so powerful of a card. I personally can't wait for the reprints because I plan on picking the deck back up to play a little something with Dogmatika, whether it be Eldlich or Amazement I really want to try out. But Shaddoll, Invoke, Dogmatika going unscathed on this ban lift blows my mind. I thought we would have at least seen Winded to 1, but I think it still remains at tier 1.
Yeah, it definitely is a strong contender for sure. I think that it's interesting because Shaddoll had like a super a large amount of prevalence at the start of last format, but people were kind of dropping it towards the end. Part of me kind of feels that it's because of the way the format developed, and Shaddoll, like just as kind of a core, like kind of ignoring the other engines here for a little bit, is somewhat reactive as far as how it stacks up against the meta. Like for example, this is like purely hypothetical, but if you're in a trap dominant format, then Winded doesn't really do anything. But that being said, of course, I think that we're entering a format where there's kind of a lot of like grindy, quote unquote, mid range decks where people are going to try and set up a lot of follow up plays alongside their initial defense. So the Shaddoll engine definitely is solid. And as you mentioned, Nadir Servant's just a ridiculous card. We'll see with time how this deck kind of slots in because I'm not really sure how much it's going to define the meta by itself. But that being said, it definitely is a very powerful contender.
Absolutely, and I look forward to seeing where it places moving forward. I think it can fall out of relevancy, but for right now, I think it is pretty dominant. Moving on to the next decks, one of my personal least favorite deck, Drytron. Even though I hate the deck, I'm still gonna put it at tier 1. I played the deck when it first came out, and it was first meta relevant with 3 Benten and Union Carrier, of course, pre-Mubeta Fafnir, and I did like the deck, but now it feels like you either win the die roll or you lose the game. It's so hard losing the die roll and trying to establish that first turn. First turn going second. I'm sorry. I really think the deck is just it sets up its first turn combo, and that's really all it does. Now you don't really use Natasha anymore. You don't really use Geonated Transverser. I don't believe people play anymore. It's not as good as breaking a board with just the main deck as it used to be, not having the side deck access to it. But with that all being said, it is still an insane deck with crazy consistency. It has follow-up, and its first turn board is pretty unbreakable.
Yeah, one of the things I will say about Drytron is that a lot of people seem to always pack main deck out to like the Herald of Ultimateness opens, whether it be through just straight up main decking Joel or like playing Droplet, Dark Ruler. People really dislike the deck a lot. It's super polarizing. So like I think the deck at its core is still pretty strong. But that being said, of course, it's one of those decks that I think sort of almost similar to like Ignister, for example. If people like are super over prepared for the deck, it definitely won't be the scary threat that people make it out to be. I feel. I don't think it's by itself the best deck of the format personally, but I do also consider it a tier 1 deck just for the sheer fact that it demands respect. Otherwise, you just kind of lose the game. Which, those kinds of decks you could argue whether or not they're healthy for the game. That's another discussion entirely. But that's definitely where I think the deck stands at the current moment.
Absolutely. It is one of those decks that, like you said, do command respect because you have to be prepared in your main deck for the matchup. A lot of people now are maining Drone and Lockbird because that is the biggest hindrance to Drytron being that most of the good cards search in the deck. But we'll have to see how it goes moving forward now that it does have Mubeta Fafnir and can really represent at these next events. Moving on, we do have Eldlich. Now, this is just like pure trap Eldlich. You can call it Eldlich Dogmatika. You can call it Eldlich Amazement, however you want to put it. I don't think that it can go above tier 2 in this current meta. Similar to Drytron, it's one of those win the die roll, lose the game. Those are your two options. It really does have a hard time going second breaking boards, especially in just the trap version. You really only have Golden Lord's Effect to send as your most reactive removal card in the deck. But Forbidden Droplets is still a card, and Forbidden Droplets obviously does plus off the traps because you can banish them, get all your effects, and reset. It is one of the best grind decks that I've ever seen, but I just don't think it can stack up to the combo decks that's in this meta specifically.
Yeah, I'm gonna insert a little bit of personal bias here and say that I've never been a big fan of Eldritch cards in general. I just think they're super, super slow. Because any individual Eldritch card by itself doesn't actually warrant or like constitute an interruption. So like you're really just relying on whatever other engines you're playing to kind of make up the ground for you until you can actually pick up the slack and just start grinding. That being said, of course, as you mentioned, once the deck does get off to the races, it is nearly unbeatable in terms of the grind. But I think a lot of these other decks that we're going to be seeing in Tier 1 are either just faster natively or have like a lot of ways to kind of deal with the Eldritch engine. You think about Shaddoll and like Ariel just banishing the entire graveyard. You think about Drytron and just being able to have like a much, much stronger turn 1 setup. So like all of these other decks really just outclass what Eldritch tries to do a lot of the time.
Absolutely. It's, again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but we'll have to see how it fares up in the upcoming format. Who knows? It could definitely, be relevant and be a lot better. I don't believe it's getting anything in the next set that's been revealed yet that'll help it out, but we're gonna have to see in the future. Next up, I have the one of the best OG trap decks is Altergeist here. And I'm going to put that probably right next to Eldlich in Tier 2. Similar to Eldlich, it is kind of slow being it is a trap deck in a combo mid-range format. Altergeist does have a little more interaction, being able to play cards like Multi-Faker and Imperm, which doesn't really do as much as it used to anymore, but it is still pretty good interaction. Just 2 cards giving you 2 interruption, that only one of them is a hand trap and the other being a main deck monster that does facilitate combos. You can special summon Seek off of it to search more cards. You can special summon Silk to be reactive. It does have a little more, prowess than I think Eldritch does coming into this format, especially now that we have Prosperity instead of just using Extra for it. But I think that the deck does need more to function than in this, mid-range meta that we have.
Yeah, the problem I've always had with Geist, and I played the deck for a long time, but the problem I've always had is that the deck has 2 major flaws in terms of its functionality. The first is that it can just brick, whether you draw too many Geist monsters or you draw not enough traps to trigger Faker, for example, or if you draw too many traps and not enough engine. It's a deck that very much has 2 sort of sides to its win condition, but if you don't draw enough of either, it can suffer. And then the other thing is that it just loses to a lot of the side deck cards, and that's really just kind of unavoidable. So people will always be packing things like Evenly, Lightning Storm, Twin Twister, Cosmic, Red Reboot, Harpy's Feather Duster. All these cards just completely ruin trap decks, and that's really not going to be changing for any time soon. So it's really rough to play trap decks at the moment currently, but it's definitely a decent meta call at times where people just don't expect it as much.
Absolutely, and funny enough that you mentioned that you played the deck a long time. A lot of people do know you as the Lunalike guy. Shout out to you topping Niagara Falls a couple of years back. But for the longest time, you played Altergeist, and that was your deck. Everyone recognized Altergeist as the deck that Ben played. But if anyone knows Altergeist, it is you. So it's good to have your opinion on where it falls in this current meta. But moving on to the next deck, Guru. Pretty similar to Altergeist and Eldlich. I have a hard time picking whether I think it's tier 2 or rogue. I only put it at tier 2 because of the ability to play Dragoon. I honestly, if it didn't have access to Dragoon, I'd put it at Rogue. It in and of itself is a good engine, but it's not a solid deck. But with the access to playing, 3 Red Eyes Fusion, triple Dragoon in the extra deck, even Insight if you want to search it that badly, the deck does a lot. It is insane that you can, Dragoon and then set Guru, flipping it with Hidden City does not count as a summon, so it plays around Red Eyes Fusion's restriction. And I've said it before, and I'll say it as long as the card is legal, I will play Dragoon. That is the best card in Yu-Gi-Oh! In my opinion. I think that the card is absolutely ridiculous. It's the best legal card in the game right now. But that's my personal bias. How do you feel about Guru?
Yeah, Guru is in an interesting spot. I think that it kind of does cover for one of my previously mentioned Geist weaknesses, in that whether you stick a Dragoon or whether you grab Fiendish, you can actually sort of help mitigate the big, massive blowout cards post-side. But of course, that being said, it definitely is tough when combo decks are super resilient, and a lot of those sort of blowout cards just kind of help pave the way for their main strategy, their main game plan, and their win condition. So it is pretty rough still. Like, that being said, to just try and play a trap deck. But I do think that Guru, again, the ability to just play Dragoon is what makes it, I guess, kind of stand out from the other trap decks out there.
Absolutely. Moving on to the next deck, Heroes. It's Rogue. It won't ever give Heroes a negate fusion that's easy to summon, and it won't be Rogue anymore. We just got new support for it, and it's a plasma card that makes plasma has its effects from the anime, I believe. I didn't even read it. I've always had Heroes. I have it sitting in a binder over here. I want it to be good. It won't be. You give it a negate, or the deck's gonna be Rogue forever. That's all I have to say about it.
Yeah, it's rough. I mean, Hero, I don't think has been super dominant for a long, long time. But I mean, it's a fan favorite. It'll always be receiving new support, so we'll just see what happens.
Absolutely. Moving on to the next deck, we have a personal vengeance of mine being Madolche. I have a love-hate relationship with this deck. I do put it at tier 2 because it does snag a top 8, top 16 spot in almost every event that it's entered in. It does pretty well in that tier 2 mid-range category. You can play, blind second. You can play control. The deck's, it has a lot of options to play. And the deck, I have played against Madolche probably 50 times, and I can tell you what 2 of the cards do. I don't know. They all search. They all special. It just confuses me. That's why I love and I hate the deck. I do actually want to sit down and learn it one day, but I think it is definitely a nice tier 2 option. Take it to an event. You can snag one of those top 16, top 8 spots with it, especially since, I don't want to say a lot of people don't know what it does, but there are so many cards that do similar things. It does get confusing. A lot of people don't know what to interact with. Also, piece of advice for anyone. If they're doing this specific route, you want a Nibiru when they activate Gelato's effect. I believe they have the 1xZs on board, they have Hoot Cake, and then they'll normal summon Gelato. Nibiru there because they need to have the Beast to resolve Gelato's effect. That is the best place to Nibiru in that specific combo. Getting off on a tangent here, I definitely feel like it's deserving of the tier 2 category.
We've seen a lot of sort of adaptations more recently. I remember players kind of teching in Herald of Orange Light, because there are a fair amount of main deck fairies in the deck, and people were also main decking Lancey when that was popular. The deck definitely has a lot of go first options now, because obviously with the new support, Salon gets you access to Promenade, which is a free in-engine interruption, and Glass of Flay is really good as a means of helping you kind of dodge interruptions on your turn, making your stuff unaffected, but also in sort of a grave dominant format. You think of matchups like Drytron, just being able to Transmigration Prophecy stuff away on your opponent's turn is really good too. Not to mention the fact that this is one of the few decks that can natively actually recycle its own hand traps, even though there are some conflicts with playing hand traps to begin with Pedixisor, for example. So, I mean, the deck definitely has a lot of very interesting routes it can take. We've also seen stuff like Madolche Eldlich pop up, which is really interesting and fascinating. But there's a lot of different directions you can take for sure. But I think one of the things is that a lot of its plays are pretty telegraphed if you are well versed and experienced with the deck. But I do also think that's one of its, I guess, peerless weapons is the fact that a lot of people, again, are still kind of unfamiliar with it. So it's always a good kind of like toolbox, I guess, to have up your sleeve if you're good with the deck. That just depends on how well you know your matchups.
Yeah, if you do know the deck very well, it definitely can be a very powerful strategy. I would definitely put it above all the other decks I currently have here in Tier 2 in terms of playability. It is still a very solid deck. Going on to the next one, I have pure Mech Knight. Now, this is just not Mech Knight Invoked. This is just pure Mech Knight. A very personal favorite deck of mine. I still don't think I could put it above the Rogue category. I do want to say shout out to my team captain, Deshaun, who actually took first place with pure Mech Knight recently, about 2 months ago, I believe, at an event in Philadelphia with a bunch of prominent players. The channel is up on my profile if you do guys want to see it. Also, shout out to Shannon Long. He has been just grinding Mech Knight on Dueling Book and entering events. I believe he is entering the YCS. I will also link his channel down in the bio, being that I mentioned him. But Mech Knight as a pure deck, especially with the traps that and the one spell key, it definitely is interesting. It brings a lot of different strategies together, especially with the column ideas. It makes you have to play more careful. Playing against Mech Knight, you have to really think about it. And it's funny enough, back when Invoked Mech Knight was a lot more popular, me and Ben would play GOAT, and he would actually train himself to put cards in other columns, even in GOAT format, so you're always playing around Mech Knight. If you got that habit into your head, you'll always have that habit. And Mech Knight definitely used to be a little more prominent than it is now, but I can't justify putting it higher than Rogue at the moment.
Yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned the whole story with like playing around Mech Knights and Go, because I really feel like Mech Knights is sort of like the modern playing around Gores, you know, like people like old school players who would play around Gores, like even up until now. I think it's kind of a similar case with just the call mechanic, but yeah, the deck is definitely interesting with Girsu and I guess Sangan as well. The deck can have plays going first, which is something the deck really didn't have a capacity to do previously. But that being said, of course, I think the deck has just slightly too low of a ceiling. It's definitely more of a control deck for sure, but I think that the deck definitely sort of doesn't have a fantastic reliability of just like have like threatening the game in ways that a lot of the decks above it do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely has options, but I don't think it can hold up, especially going second in the meta that we're staying today. I mean, what is a blue sky going to do against a Herald that has 5 negates in hand? It is a bit unfortunate for a fan favorite deck that a lot of people do love Mech Knights, but we'll have to see where it goes in the future. Next up, I have Mermails. And I do want to say, remember, this is our personal opinion. This is not fact. Mermail players don't hate me, but I'm going to put it in Rogue. Mermail was this close to being Tier 1. If the spell that they're releasing soon that lets you reveal the Synchro, that can special summon Deep Sea Diva, did not lock you into Waters, or does it lock you into Waters or Aqua? I can't remember exactly what it is.
I actually have not read the cards.
Oh, okay. So basically what the card does is you reveal a Synchro monster from your extra deck. I believe it does lock you... Oh, it locks you into Synchro Summoning. I believe that's what it is. My apologies. You reveal a Synchro monster from your extra deck that requires a specific monster as Synchro material, and then special summon that material from your deck. But you can only special summon Synchro monsters for the rest of the turn from your extra deck. It was very close to greatness, but it needs the Link monsters to play. If that card did not lock you into Synchros, the deck would probably be, in my opinion, would be at least Tier 1.5. Because, just having 6 copies of Diva in your deck is insane. Not only having 3 other Neptibus to start your play, Teus and any other, Neptibus, Diva, doesn't matter, also starts your combos. Dragoon is still an amazing card. I just can't justify putting the deck higher with that being the restriction.
Yeah, this is one of those decks that like has a really, really loyal fan base. The people who are playing Mermail, they've been playing it for years, and they'll continue to, regardless of the format. So they'll find ways to try and adapt. But I think at its core, it just kind of it's seen its time, but it needs like really, really broken support that doesn't have those strings attached.
Yeah. So moving on to the next deck, we have Mystic Mine. I'm going to put it in Rogue rather than Tier 2, only because of remote duels is our current landscape of Yu-Gi-Oh! If remote duel wasn't banning cards that interact with your opponent's deck in hand, I can see Mystic Mind going to at least tier 2, but Oracle, the Skull Goddess, is one of the strongest spells in Mystic Mind, and allowing you to just keep stacking your opponent's deck so they don't see the card they need. I mean, what are they going to... At one point, they're going to just reveal 3 Cosmic Cyclone, but the chances of that happening are slim to none. And not being able to have access to Skull Goddess, Oracle, and Remote Duels does hinder the deck a lot. I'm only putting it in Rogue because Remote Duel is the formats that we have to look at as of right now. But other than that, I could justify putting it in tier 2.
Yeah, it's also one of the decks that kind of functions like a trap deck and thus has a lot of the similar weaknesses. Now, to be fair, it can play more cards to actually help facilitate the win condition, as you mentioned with the Goddess Skulls Oracle or whatever it's called. But that being said, because again of the current remote duel environment, I do agree that the deck definitely suffers immensely because of that.
Absolutely. Moving on to the next deck, we have Infernoble. I'm going to put Infernoble again in Rogue. I can't see it doing much. It definitely didn't gain anything out of the last set. It didn't gain anything off the ban list. It just isn't doing anything. It's a lot more fragile than it used to be. Its boards are a lot more subpar than they used to be. Especially not being able to rip cards with Smoke Grenade made the deck 1,000 times better in that capacity. But even after Smoke Grenade ban, they had the place to make VFD. VFD's banned now. You're getting a pop and a negate through 4 cards in your hand, and it can't even play through a single hand trap. You have to have the perfect hand to be able to extend through all those, have every extender, but that's why I'm justifying putting it at Rogue.
Yeah, it lost a lot of the capacity as well to sort of just mitigate hand traps, because a lot of the plays previously, like when the deck was at full power, would involve summoning Savage early to kind of help just protect your Isolde or protect your Needle Fiber. But now that you don't really have those insurance options anymore, the deck is just a lot more, as you mentioned, fragile compared to the other combo decks out there.
Definitely. The next deck we have up is Orcust, and prior to the start of this video, me and Ben sat down, we put together our tier list to discuss where we're going to put stuff, and I'm actually making an addendum here. I'm making an adjustment. I'm putting Orcust from Rogue to tier 2, thinking about it a little more often, not even with just the Scrap Raptor combo coming out. That does facilitate the deck to have a little bit better of an end board, being that you have another starter, but Girsu already being the best starter in the deck made it pretty good. I honestly think the deck is a little bit better than Rogue. I can justify putting it at tier 2, being that the deck has, it has recursion, and it has follow-up, it has negates, it has protection and Dingirsu, and at the array of link monsters that you could play in it now, the deck does actually do a little bit more than I initially thought.
Yeah, I think actually the best build of Orcust is still probably going to be Orcust Eldlich, which we saw kind of become more popular at the end of last format. The deck definitely is cool. Just pretty much the way Orcust Eldlich functions, for those of you guys out there who aren't familiar, is that it functions very much as a control deck. It plays 3 Crescendo, and it basically just turbos out Galatea and puts up Crescendo every turn. You have cool synergies, for example, like Lord Pitch Crescendo, so you can search Girsu, and then you basically are just able to grind with both of the engines, and really just make it so your opponent has a hard time out-resourcing you, since they have to contend with all of your setup. So I think that's still probably the best way to play the deck. But that being said, of course, the deck could still evolve to more combo routes if people are dedicated enough to try it.
Definitely. I think it definitely has potential moving forward. People trying out new versions of it, and maybe one day we'll get Harp off the ban list, but for now, you could stay banned. I don't care. I don't want to see you again. Moving on to the next deck, obviously you have the best deck, Tier 1 Pendulum. There's definitely no deck better. I'm kidding, I'm not even going to make the full joke. It's Rogue, even though we got Double Iris off the ban list to 2. We got Skullcrabat to 1, which I think, honestly, Double Iris to 2 is better than Skullcrabat to 1. That's besides the point. Electrum's still banned, Astrograph is still banned. The best cards still just don't do anything for pure magicians. It can definitely do more now. It definitely does a lot more than it used to. Pure Magicians is, in my opinion, better than the previous Mythical Beast and Demion build. You definitely have a lot more plays, a lot more follow-up, a lot more utility cards, but I just can't justify putting it past Rogue in its current condition. Maybe if we get Skullcrabat and Double Iris to 3, I don't think that that's going to hurt the game in any way. It might bump it up to tier 2. I can't put it as a meta deck. It just doesn't have the versatility that it used to anymore.
Yeah, so one of the things that has always sort of like pivoted me away from Pendulum personally at events especially is that as the game progresses, as like Yu-Gi-Oh just continues to evolve, like defensive cards are pretty important to have. And Pendulum is one of those decks where it can't really main deck those just because it needs all their cards to play. Like more than any other combo deck, it really needs its entire hand. So you're kind of relying on the back of games 2 and 3 and just playing like the most powerful cards you can. Things like, Dark Ruler, or like Sphere Mode, or Lava Golem, or like Evenly Matched, which granted are super, super powerful. But I think a lot of these decks not only have more mechanisms to deal with those types of cards, but they can also just kind of, incorporate them into their builds going first, like in the main deck. And Pendulum's innate capacity to not be able to do that makes it definitely, stand out as just a major weakness. And that's kind of one thing that no matter how many things come off the ban list, that's a problem that I think is going to persist for as long as Pendulum is around.
Definitely. I mean, who knows? Maybe Triff's going to come up with the best brew and, top the next LCS or, win the remote duel YCS. But until that happens, I can safely say it's not higher than Rogue.
Its ceiling is always really, really strong for sure. Like it has some of the best end boards possible, but it really, the game is definitely more than just what hand can, or what can your test hands achieve, right?
Oh, definitely. I feel like playing Pendulum is just a pissing contest with your opponent's combo deck. It's just who can build the better board. But moving on, we have Phantom Knight, which is a personal favorite of mine. I have been playing that competitively for about 2.5, 3 months now. Me and 2 of my friends actually won a 3v3 where I was playing Phantom Knight. I love the deck. I love it. It is one of my top 3 favorite decks of all time. Phantom Knight is super, super cool. I can gush about it all day, but from a competitive standpoint, I have to be realistic. It definitely isn't higher than tier 2. I would put it above Rogue. Similar to Madolche, it does sneak into the top cut in a lot of events that it enters. I believe even in Ben, your online tournaments, Phantom Knight has done pretty well consistently over the course of them. It definitely has a lot of versatility, plays through hand traps pretty well, and again, having access to Dragoon makes the deck good. A lot of people play Requiem over Dragoon. I don't know why, because if you do that, you don't have a single spell or trap negate, and you lose to Harpy's Feather Duster, getting rid of 2 of your Fog Blades. You lose to Dark Ruler no more. I mean, with Dragoon you do anyways, but that's besides the point. You lose to Imperm, Chalice, anything that just negates your monsters. I don't personally love Requiem, especially being that Talons can take your Requiem, and you can't negate it because it's a spell. Play Dragoon. If you play this deck, play Dragoon. That's just my personal opinion on it.
Yeah, so Phantom Knight is one of those decks that I think is like a very, very cool. It's kind of like mid-rangey in a lot of cases because it does have the control element with Fog Blades and just trying to set up past turn 1 as well. It definitely is pretty resilient. It's just the fact that there's a lot of targeted cards that really do stop the deck. Things like Lancia, things like well-timed Nibiru's, for example, can really ruin your day. So there's a lot of circumstances where Phantom Knight can struggle. But that being said, of course, the deck still has pretty good ceiling, all things considered. I think if you were to kind of pick between that and something like Infernoble, it would definitely, you definitely want to play Phantom Knight in that sort of scenario, just because I think it's a lot easier to resolve, your major win condition. But again, it definitely does have its shortcomings, which makes it below the other decks on the list.
Definitely. I always said prior to this current ban list neutering Dragon Link, I said Phantom Knight is basically Diet Dragon Link. It's a combo deck that puts up monsters that have negates and a back row or 2 that does interaction with each other. And my personal favorite part about Phantom Knight is your opponent can exhaust every one of his resources breaking your board. If he doesn't kill you, next turn you have such a strong advantage because you have a graveyard full of Phantom Knights, and all of them love being in the graveyard. There's so much utility with it. Again, I can gush about it all day, but I'm going to move on to the next deck. Next up, we have Plunder Patroll, and Plunder Patrol did get a new card in the most recent set, Lightning Overdrive. I don't think it has gotten much better. It definitely improved. I don't think I can justify putting it above Rogue. It definitely has potential. if it gets more support for some reason in the future, it can definitely do a lot more things than it does now. But we haven't had enough events with Lightning Overdrive being released to justify putting Plunder Patrol higher. It definitely has plays. It's definitely something to pick up and, be interested in, figure out how the deck works, because you're going to see it. It is a popular deck. A lot of people play it. There's like 2 people at my locals that play it. But it's something you're going to see, learn how to play against the deck. And it definitely has options. It is one of those mid-range decks that can do a lot of things with a very little amount of cards. All it takes is one monster to get your combo started.
Yeah, I think the gameplay mechanic is pretty unique in that it's fairly thematic, captains piloting ships. But that being said, of course, the deck, I do still feel like it has a lot of holes that can be patched up with, as you mentioned, potential future support. So we'll just have to see what direction the deck takes.
Definitely. The next deck we have is Prank Kids, and I'm going to have to put that in tier 1 up there with Drytron and Shaddoll. So Prank Kids has been super relevant. It fell out of relevancy after its first YCS win. I believe that it win Milan, if I'm not mistaken, back when it first came out.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
It was a long time ago. I believe it was Milan 2018. Correct me down in the comments if I'm wrong. But then it just kind of fell out of relevancy. Salamangreat became relevant, and then we got into Eternal format, my personal favorite format, and it finally made its way back. It figured itself out. Meow Meow came out in Phantom Rage, and the deck needing a Link 1, Konami answered everyone's prayers. So whoever out there played Prank Kids and prayed that they'd get a Link 1, your wish was granted. It could have been a vanilla Link 1, and the deck still would probably be a tier 1. Meow Meow was just super good as an extender, and just even the Ash or the Skullmeister on whatever you normal summon, especially another monster, they can now afford to play through those extenders with a well-timed Pandemonium, a Pranks getting the token, stuff like that. The deck definitely had a lot of potential, but with that Link 1, it soared to the top, and it's been super relevant ever since. I can't justify putting it lower than tier 1.
I think one of the best advantages of Prank Kids is that it's very adaptable. There's a lot of spaces in the main deck for you to incorporate a lot of non-engine cards, and that makes that regardless of what the format ends up being, the deck can definitely shift its game plan accordingly, which is a very good advantage to have. Plus, being a 1-card combo deck, people always complain about Prank Kids is a 1-card engine. Alistair is a 1-card engine. That's one of the reasons why people
normal summon Alistair.
Yeah, it's just that it's so easy to get your game plan and your win condition online, and that's super solid.
Definitely. It definitely is just one of those decks that it's gonna stay relevant until it isn't. I don't think it's gonna get hurt on the ban list anytime soon. I don't think it's oppressive, but it's definitely relevant. Learn how to play against it. Learn how to play the deck yourself if you want to play a meta deck. I don't think it's too expensive, actually. You could probably pick up the core for under $150, if I'm not mistaken, at this current time. But it's an interesting deck. It's definitely something to learn, and 12 normal summon 1-card starters is a pretty good deck to me. Moving on to the next deck, we have poor Dragon Link. I'm still gonna justify putting it at tier 2, even though we did lose LP and we did lose 2 Striker Dragon. The deck definitely still can do stuff. Hopefully, for the Dragon Link players, I don't play Dragon Link. I don't like the deck that much. For the Dragon Link players that do wish to continue to play the deck, someone comes up with something again where the deck can be relevant. The deck has combos in play, especially maybe the new Dragoonity stuff that came out. I think Remus is the new one, the new main deck monster. It definitely has options. You can still play Dragon Link. You just can't play in the capacity that it previously was as good. It's just not as good as it was, and there's no way around that.
Yeah, I think actually something that's pretty interesting is kind of messing around with it a little bit myself is the Striker hit definitely I feel hurts actually more than the LP hit, which kind of feels weird to say, but a lot of
definitely.
the plays, the plays definitely involving the grind game had to involve the second and third copies of Striker Dragon. So like not really having the grind game in that aspect with like looping with Recharger definitely is a hindrance. Also, it makes your guard dragon zones really awkward because Pisty of course works best with something like LP or Striker, which both point left. And if you use your first Striker as your first link summon, you can't really do that. So it definitely makes those kinds of plays more awkward. So people are gonna have to reroute their combo lines entirely. You mentioned like the Trinity stuff where Remus is a pretty good 1-card starter. It gets you pretty far by itself, because you eventually can get into like the OG LP, which is the Dragunity Atom, the Xyz monster. So you can work around and mess with that, but the plays definitely are more fragile if you try and like go in that direction. The other thing I've seen people kind of mess around with is like more of a sort of almost control style build where they just end minimally with like seal and maybe like tidying if they have to open like chamber. So like those are some potential routes. I think those are pretty divergent ways of playing the deck, and I think one will emerge as the superior build eventually. But the deck I don't think is by any means dead. It'll just have to require a lot of thinking in the lab to kind of make it work.
Oh, definitely. It's going to be one of those wait and see. Someone's going to come up with something and the deck's going to be playable. We're just going to have to wait on that. Next up, we have one of the winners from the previous ban list. We have Salamangreat, and I am super hesitant putting it in tier 2. I really would like to put it in tier 1.5. I just can't. I think that Mirage Stallion being unbanned is amazing. Putting it to 1, even though everyone only played 1 copy of it. Some people played 2, but regardless, putting it to 1 gave the deck so much more access to Gazelle. Gazelle dumping the traps, getting them back with your Wolf was, the best part of the deck. It protects you. It's a protect the castle deck. You want to make sure you survive until you get OTK. Now that we have Access Code Talker and Mirage Stallion, even though you can't use Mirage Stallion's effect and Access Code Talker in the same turn because you're locked into fire effects, it is still an amazing part of your turn 1 combo, and it definitely has a lot more potential than it previously did. And now I believe every Salamangreat card is illegal on the ban list. Whether it be at 1, nothing is at 0. Everything is playable. The only cards we have now are Gazelle to 1, Circle to 1, and Mirage Stallion to 1. So maybe in the future Konami will light up a little bit on Salad. I think it is a very fair deck, very fair mid-range deck. It does a little bit, but that little bit does go a long way. So hopefully Konami gives us a little bit more back, but that's, again, a personal bias of mine because I really, really love Salad as a deck.
Yeah, I think the deck getting back Mirage Stallion is very, very good in terms of, like you mentioned, getting access to Gazelle, which one could argue it's access to the same cards, and which that's true, but I think that being able to just play with more resiliency, you can return to the level 3 extenders, stuff like Sea Archiver comes to mind. So like having those options to be able to just play past like say like an Ash and Assignment Mining definitely makes the deck a lot more appealing to play from that aspect. So I think the deck has more options going for it. That being said, as you mentioned though, it doesn't really alter. It doesn't really alter the ceiling or like what the deck fundamentally does as a whole. And there's nothing wrong with that for sure. It just makes it so that it can, access its game plan a lot more efficiently than it did previously.
Definitely, and I cannot wait to see what people come up with for the new Salamangreat lists. I really look forward to playing it. The next deck I'm going to, if I'm able to, I'm going to put at the end there because I want to talk about this last because I have some things to say. So I'm just going to move on to Frogs here, and Frogs I'm going to have to put in Rogue. It hasn't gained anything. Frogs is still kind of where it sits. It's one of those, it's a trap deck, but it's not the same kind of trap deck that Eldlich, Altergeist, and Guru are. It is extremely slow. It is definitely lose the die roll, lose the game type of deck, and Frogs definitely just aren't doing much.
Yeah, like the only real play starter it has is Swap Frog. I mean, we've seen people mess around with stuff like Buzzsaw Shark to go for Bahamut into Toad, but that's a little bit of a stretch. Yeah, I think unlike the other decks, this deck definitely needs a lot more going for it in order for the game to go well. And if you don't see Swap Frog, it's really, really hard to play the game. And I mean, things like Prosperity definitely help. Like the deck can play Zeus, which is cool, but I think fundamentally the deck really is more based on its traps than it is a lot of time with its engine. Because the engine primarily just helps you push for game. And it is definitely strong at being aggressive. But like when it can actually get to that point, the problem is, getting to that, area where you're able to actually push for game.
Yeah, definitely. It's just kind of sitting where it sits. If it gets more support in the future, by all means, it deserves it. It's a fan favorite deck. A lot of people love playing it, and it is one of the, one of those meta trap decks that a lot of people really enjoyed. Moving on, we have Tri-Brigade. Now, this could be pure Tri-Brigade. It could be Tri-Brigade Zoo. I am going to put it with 1.5. I really can't say I believe wholeheartedly it's going to be tier 1. I think it is a little bit slower without that Trident play. It doesn't fill up your graveyard by just normal summoning Rat anymore. You have to actually work for it a little bit harder. Normal summon Rat does still get you somewhere, but it doesn't get you as far as it used to with the Trident play, having 3 monsters on board to make a Farragut with 2 of them, and then having a graveyard full of 4 monsters for your Tri-Brigade play. Pure Tri-Brigade is one of the best decks in the OCG, so I do look forward to seeing what people do with Pure Tri-Brigade, but as of right now, I'm going to put it in the 1.5 category.
Yeah, I think this is one of the decks that you and I disagree on a little bit. I actually do think it still is going to be a tier 1 personally. Again, time will tell, but I do think that at its core, the Tri-Brigade cards function really well as an engine to be able to not only put up interruptions, but also just be able to recur itself turn after turn after turn. Obviously, access to Revolt is crazy. And I think that even if, whether or not people choose to incorporate the Zoo engine still, that definitely remains to be seen. But I think in either case, like the Tri-Brigade cards themselves are super strong enough on their own to constitute a good win condition. So I think the deck is very, very strong personally. But again, it kind of depends on like which decks end up seeing the most play, which decks are being represented the most, and then how decks kind of adapt in response.
Definitely, yeah. I completely understand where you're coming from. It is just kind of one of those wait and see type of decks. We have actually yet to, as we're recording this, we're recording it, I believe the 21st is today. We are still days away from the ban list even being effective. So we're going to have to see moving forward. But I can definitely justify bumping it up to tier 1 with results from events coming up. But moving on to the second to last deck we have here, Virtual World is a super, super fun deck. I'm going to put it in tier 2. Pre-VFD ban, the deck was not fun. I didn't enjoy playing it. I played it. It's just one thing over and over again. Now you have a ton of options on how you could play Virtual World. You can play the Kaliga combo. You can play the Dragoon combo where you end with Dragoon, Crystal Wing, Kaliga Crystal Wing. You can play more of the XZ's builds where you end on stuff like Beatrice. You can end on stuff like Bamboozling Gossip Shadow. Shouts to my friend Sammy Valentino, who just topped 2 events in a row that he went to. I would like to post his deck profile. I'm going to contact him and get in touch with him about that. 2 events in a row that he actually just topped with Virtual World. He is playing one of the coolest combos that I've seen. It might fall out now that Dragon Link isn't relevant. He would play Beatrice to send...
Is this the Banshee combo?
Yeah, the Banshee combo. Yeah. I didn't see that until he told me about it. And he said, yeah, people figured this out and you can send the Banshee combo. It's so cool. You could just send Banshee of, I think it's Necro World or something like that.
Necro World Banshee.
Yeah. Then banish it, get Necro, or not Necro Valley, Jesus.
Zombie World.
Zombie World, thank you. I'm blanking here on these card names. And that's just super, super cool. It was super good against Tri-Brigade Zoo because everything on field and graveyard became a zombie. It was super good against Dragon Link because dragons was their only play. The deck is just super, super interesting, and that play was super, super fun. I loved seeing that.
Yeah, I think VW is one of the few decks actually that I own in person. So I really have been playing the deck quite a bit in remote duel tournaments and stuff. It's a deck that I enjoy quite a lot. It has the unfortunate nature of sort of just bricking sometimes, and that sucks. But that being said, I think the deck is one of the most versatile decks in our format. Personal biases aside, I would love to put it higher, but I think that unfortunately it just definitely can suffer if it's not able to kind of achieve its win condition. One of the biggest things, for example, is like in the Dragon Link matchup, you kind of lose to Seal if you didn't open Kowloon, which definitely sucks.
It is a bit sad, yeah.
With that problem out of the way, I think the deck can have more room to sort of experiment and play other cards to kind of just help its game plan. Like the deck has space for hand traps, for example. So I think the deck can evolve and be a pretty solid contender, but I don't think it'll be meta defining by itself.
And moving on to our final deck of this tier list, I can't understand why Konami would put this to 1. Now, I didn't play in this format, but I don't believe you did, Ben, either. But a lot of the older players will remember a time where Snatch Steal got banned, and then Konami put it to 1. And then they realized that that was a stupid decision, and then it got banned again. In October, Engage is going to be banned again. I cannot see it not being banned. I've been seeing replays. I've seen on DB Grinder's channel, Lithium has posted replays. It's just, resolving Engage twice in a turn is enough That's enough. You don't need to resolve it 5 times in a turn. It's just such a powerful card. I definitely see the deck being tier 1.5, possibly tier 1. The deck is going to explode with popularity. The cards are already through the roof on the card market and TCG Player. I don't understand why Konami did it. I personally, like I said before, 2019 Nats format, Eternal format, one of my favorites. That was my least favorite deck. Sky Striker, just resolving engage over and over and over again. If you are a fan of GOAT, you know how you feel when your opponent activates Pot of Greed 4 or 5 times by resolving Merchant of Faith and Demock getting it back, just activating it from hand. That's exactly how it feels. It's super sacky. I hate it. I'm upset about it. Ben, what do you think?
So I think it's pretty interesting because literally nobody saw this one coming, right? Like
except for Farfa. Farfa saw this coming. The brainworms won today.
Yeah, but okay, that anomaly aside.
Oh my god.
I think the deck definitely, it makes a big difference. Like, I think there's some people out there who might be like, oh, fundamentally, the deck really just doesn't have the power level. But Engage being back even at 1 makes a big difference. Obviously, you can't be as greedy with it, like searching double engage, or rather searching for the second engage with like Shizuku, or like resetting it off multi-roll. Like, those plays aren't really a thing anymore. Or at least, yeah, it's like pretty tough to play greedily. But I was testing a little bit actually against a friend of mine who is coming back into the game because of this, and it's terrifying. The deck really can accrue advantage very fast. You can play the Foolish Burial Goods engine again, because like Good Sending Engage is like basically the same as like Hayate. The deck can go first or go second very flexibly. It generates advantage very fast. It also gets access to the limited cards, like even faster than it did previously. Like if you remember, around this time last year, even when like Ryan Yu won an LCS with Striker, he really wasn't relying on multi-roll at all. He was just trying to go second, use Afterburner, Widowmaker to like break Adamancipator boards or like Synchro Eldlich boards, and then kind of just use those to win the game. But the game plan can definitely change with Striker just being able to now do all of that, plus still have access to like the multi-roll to just grind forever. So I think that the deck is terrifying. It is definitely going to be strong for sure. People are going to be optimizing it and piloting it, and it's going to be a nightmare to deal with.
I will never understand it because even the thought process behind it was that, oh, they're not going to set it off multi-roll because then it'll get banished. Kagari's at 3. Kagari is at 3. And you can recycle the Kagari and the Engage with Hercules base. You don't need 3 Engage. You just want 3 Engage. It's previous to the unbanning, it was just a fun rogue deck. Oh, Widow Anchor's at 3, steal an opponent's monster. You play Mystic Mine, Tikaboo. Some people play Dragoon in it even. With Engage, it's just, it's just back to the way it used to be. Welcome to the format. It's in ruins. You're welcome. I hate it. I hate everything about it, and I'm going to be upset until October because I know it's getting banned again, and I'm calling that now. But other than my grievances with Engage, thank you so much, Ben, for coming here today and doing this tier list with me. Again, man, I cannot wait to see you at locals again, see you in person, hang out, play some duels. I know that these past 2 years with COVID have been pretty rough, but now, like I said before in the beginning of the video, we are getting to a sense of normalcy, and that goes for everyone out there. I hope everyone is able to start going back to their locals, start playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and I hope that Konami finally lifts the ban on Yu-Gi-Oh events, and maybe, just maybe, we can get back to some sense of normalcy. But again, man, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, of course. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely, man. And if you haven't already, please go down below, go to the bio, and subscribe to Sir Emanon's channel. I'm going to link him. Absolutely, go subscribe, like his videos. Go to his Discord. He runs tournaments all the time. I believe you're in the middle of one right now, correct?
Yeah, so our 9th one actually just ended. I'm still posting feature matches from Top Cut, but signups are currently open actually on my Discord server, and that will be under the new ban list. So those signups will be until June 30th at midnight. So you can go ahead and hop into my Discord server. Our tournaments lately have been getting pretty big, around like 100 or so players. So if you want to, definitely go ahead and sign up.
Definitely, man. Like I said before, go subscribe, go to the Discord, sign up for his tournaments. Now that I'm a little bit slower into the slower season at work, I will actually be entering this next tournament, Ben, which I have yet to enter one of yours because I've mostly been doing in-person Yu-Gi-Oh! At locals. But I'm going to actually enter this one now that I have a little bit more time. So if you want to come in, you want to play against me for any reason, if you have a personal vendetta against me, I get it. That's besides the point. Definitely go sign up, subscribe to the channel. Also, if you'd like to, subscribe to my channel, Keys Hour Gaming. Leave a like, drop a comment down below what you guys want to see next. I definitely want to do more collabs in the future, not only with Emanon, other Yu-Gi tubers, because a lot of you guys love to see that kind of stuff, and we'll definitely be looking forward into the next format. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.